What the fuck? I think the AI just crashed out. Ways to fix your sleep pattern. Make appointments really early. Could be a hairdresser, could be meeting up with a friend. But you won't, from my experience, the only way to properly fix your sleeping schedule is to set appointments fairly early. Like, you need a reason to wake up, right? If you're just gonna tell yourself, yeah, I'm just gonna wake up early, you won't do it. Unless you give yourself a good reason why you should wake up early, you will just go back to sleep. Like, say for example, you make a hairdresser appointment or barber appointment at like 9:30. You will wake up because you don't want to miss it. You don't want to be, you know, embarrassed when you get there way too late, you know? That's my advice. Make appointments. Or meet up, you know, ask your friend if they want to meet up. And do the meetup at like 10, you know? Just anything. Try to come up with an appointment and set it fairly early. Waking up early for the turnips, that's, you know, that's one thing. Just don't sleep for it. Also works. Now that I would only recommend in like extreme cases. I did that a few times and it works, but it will fuck you up. I would only recommend that in cases where, you know, you go to sleep at 7 or 8 in the morning. At that point, I would recommend just stay up, make it through the day, and then go to bed at like 8 PM. But it will fuck you up. It will completely wreck you. The significance of music in video games. And the dynamic soundtrack, that when you boost, the music picks up. Such a fucking cool feature, man. I think more games should work with dynamic music. One game that does dynamic music extremely well is Payday. I think that's also the reason why I've been playing Payday 1 and 2 as much as I did. And depending on what happens during your heist, you know, if the police is, you know, doing an assault, if there's like a cooldown phase, if you're stealthing, and the music always adjusts, and it's so cool. It makes you feel so cool. And I never ever played Payday 2 without the soundtrack. Like with most games that I play for a longer period of time, at some point I usually turn off the music and just turn on my own stuff, because I've been listening to it for like a dozen times already. But I'm with Payday. Payday I dumped like 400 something hours into. Never turned off the soundtrack. Not a single time. Because it's just so fucking good. And the fact that it's dynamic makes it even better. Soundtrack is extremely important. I can't stress how much soundtrack is underestimated in games nowadays. It is actually one of the most important things. At least when you have a good game. When you have a shit game, it doesn't matter how good the soundtrack is, it's still a shit game. Right? Think about Undercover. Or something that we played recently too. Actually not played recently, no. Didn't play any shit games recently. But like Undercover, for example, you know? Not a good game, but the soundtrack was good, but it's still a mad game. One thing that I've heard in a video... Holy shit. One thing that I've definitely heard in a video is that a good soundtrack can make an already good game even better, right? Like it can propel a good game into a great game. Because the soundtrack is what helps it make memorable. When you have a good game that's also memorable, that's when you have a great game on your hands, right? That's where greatness starts. Like for example, the reason why I wouldn't say that Project Cars 3 is great. It's good, albeit with a few issues here and there. But it just lacks any memorability. You know, the soundtrack is ass. Turn it off after less than an hour. And yeah, just generally nothing to remember the game by, you know. Why old games are more difficult? They couldn't put in as much content into their games because of, you know, hardware limitations. They couldn't put so much content on the CDs and DVDs and whatnot. So to compensate for that, they just made the games harder, you know, so that the players keep playing. Hence why so many old games are actually quite difficult, because they couldn't put in so much content. You know, well, I say for once because, you know, the hardware wasn't there, but also developing games was just a different beast back then, you know. You can imagine the software developers were using wasn't as accessible, team wasn't as big, all that sort of stuff. So I couldn't put in like a massive amount of content like on, you know, modern games nowadays. So to compensate, so that you know, you don't just spend 1 hour with every game. It just made the games more difficult. And I think a good game does a balance of both. It keeps you enough content without being too stuffed, but also making the experience challenging enough that it doesn't get annoying. Or you just do it like The Witcher 3 and you just put in so much fucking content that is all worth playing while still being, you know, fun and challenging all the way through. And you just excel at both difficulty and content instead of striking compromise. Streamers and the relation to their audience in regards to the YouTube video spending time without your favorite streamer. Let me be real here for like a minute. The first time I watched this actually got me quite emotional. I will be honest. I will be completely honest. Because it really does put a lot of things into perspective that you don't normally think about when you're streaming, you know, from a streamer's perspective. Because, you know, I see you guys in chat. You know, I see Filippo, I see Spooncat, I see Pinky, I see Unpunished, I see Benz, Bestman, Risa, Mac, everyone. And what I see is names, right? Nicknames. But it's very easy to forget that, you know, behind all of those nicknames, especially when you're a larger streamer, there's like so many that you can't even remember all of them anymore, right? It becomes gradually more difficult to remember that behind all of those nicknames, there's actually people, right? And that what we say here and what we do here, you know, actually, for some to a lesser extent, for others to a larger extent, has some kind of effect on well, you guys. It's always easy to just go off to someone, to ban someone, or, you know, to make fun of someone, or, you know, whatever. It's always, you know, easy to just, I don't know, interact with someone in chat in a way that you normally wouldn't interact with them in a real person, because in real life, because you forget that there's a person behind it. And that makes me that made me reflect kind of how do I treat each of the chat members, right? Like, I don't know what's going on in your life, you know, like maybe some of you have like really an amazing time right now, which I definitely hope, but there's also a good chance that maybe some of the people watching here have had a shitty day, or just having a shitty time right now, right? And it's easy to forget that for those people, we are kind of that refuge, or, you know, I say we, you know, I'm just saying that as like we as streamers, we're kind of like that that refuge that people go to when they want to feel social but don't really have friends, or if they get bullied, they go to Twitch to feel like they belong into a community, right? Yeah. I hope that wasn't too ranty, but that's just kind of why it got me emotional, because it put things into perspective, you know, because it's easy to just see a massive amount of people with like names attached, but it's always easy to forget that, you know, it's important to remember that behind each of those names is an individual with like history and, you know, good days, bad days, feelings, that sort of stuff, you know. And, you know, after watching that, it definitely kind of reminded me that, you know, you need to consider that. But yeah, enough rambling.